Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Jacobson, you previously served in Tajikistan.
Yes, sir.
Of what period of time?
I was there from 2006 to 2009.
I'm sure you've seen the news that broke this week about 8 Tajiks who came to this country illegally over the southern border, were apprehended by the Biden administration.
Yes, sir.
Were quote-unquote vetted, and then were released. And they've been arrested this week because of their affiliations with ISIS-K and over concerns that they were plotting a major terror attack in the United States. In your experience, how dangerous is ISIS-K?
ISIS-K remains a threat both in the region to which I've been nominated and into the world, and also to our homeland. And I, if confirmed, would sort of welcome the opportunity to further discuss how we can combat this sort of terrorist threat. I'm a little bit out of the loop on Tajikistan in particular, having left there 15 years ago, but of course I still do follow it.
How concerned should Americans be that this administration released 8 illegal aliens who are Tajiks with connections to ISIS-K?
I am not privy to the intelligence or the law enforcement activity or really any of that. I have mostly read about this in the news, but I certainly think it's incumbent on all of us, all the agencies of the U.S. government, to protect our homeland. And
this is the same terrorist group that murdered 145 people in Moscow at the Opera House, came in with automatic weapons and mowed down civilians. Is that right?
It's my understanding that, yes, there were Tajiks involved in that operation in Moscow.
Well, I will say, I can tell you Texans are deeply concerned that the administration keeps releasing illegal immigrants with ties to terrorists, and we are living on borrowed time. I believe there is a higher likelihood today of a major terrorist attack in the United States than there has been any time since September 11th. And this administration's open border with 11 million illegal immigrants coming across it is an invitation for terrorists, for Hamas, for Hezbollah, for Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and for ISIS-K to come and murder Americans. And it is utterly indefensible. And yet today, the Biden administration is releasing yet more illegal immigrants into this country. They do it day after day after day. And we are going to see a lot more dead bodies as a result of it. All right, let's shift topics. A few weeks ago, Secretary Blinken appeared before this committee, and I questioned him about policy decisions made by the Biden administration, which have allowed $100 billion to flow to Iran, including access to a $10 billion pot of money involving Iraqi electricity in euros and dinars. This money enabled the Ayatollah to fund Hamas and Hezbollah. This money funded the October 7th terrorist attack, the single worst one-day massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. It is right now funding Hezbollah's push to trigger a regional Middle East war all the way through this morning. Ms. Gavito, you served for 2 years as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Iran, Iraq, and Public Diplomacy. Then you became the Acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs. What was your role in issuing the waivers giving Iran access to that pot of money?
Thank you very much, Senator. With regard to the $6 billion in question, the
$10 billion, not the
sorry.
not the $6 billion in ransom. That's another problematic decision.
Apologies. With regard to the electricity waivers, I, as Deputy Assistant Secretary, did not have a direct role in that particular decision. That being said, certainly was part of those discussions. As Ambassador Jacobson has noted, the intent behind those waivers was to incentivize the Iraqi government.
I'm not asking about the intent. Did you support those waivers?
I was not in a decision-making capacity.
Did you agree with the decision?
I would have to review, Senator. Yes, I believe that incentivizing Iraq to divest itself of Iranian oil is positive.
Okay, Ambassador Jacobson, these waivers will have to be renewed this summer or they expire. If confirmed, would you support reissuing those waivers?
So I'd note that those waivers have spanned at least 2 administrations and been renewed 21 times since 2018, if I'm not mistaken. I take heart from the commitment of the government of Iraq to achieve energy independence by 2030.
That's not an answer to the question. Would you support reissuing those waivers?
Well, I don't think it would be up to me, and I would be more than interested in serving as part of the conversation.
There is a consistent pattern in this administration of giving money to theocratic lunatics who want to murder us. $100 billion to the Ayatollah Khamenei is the single most catastrophic foreign policy decision of this administration. And today, this administration continues to refuse to enforce the oil sanctions, enriching the Ayatollah, funding Hamas, funding Hezbollah, funding those who are murdering Israelis and trying to murder Americans. How does it make sense to give billions and billions of dollars to theocratic lunatics who want to kill us?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I personally am very clear-eyed about the Iranian threat. I think I shared with you, and I'll share with others, that I have been myself on the receiving end of Iranian death threat information, including during my time in Ashgabat when President Niyazov used to remind me that the Iranians had a missile pointed at my bedroom. With regards to the funds that are kept in restricted accounts that are overseen by the Treasury Department, that are the subject of an extensive system of safeguards, these funds will never reach the government of Iran. These funds have to stay overseas, and they have to be used for humanitarian purposes. You could ask, doesn't that mean that it frees up money for their massive terrorism campaigns, which of course are heinous? And I would argue that Iran, unfortunately, is always going to focus on destabilizing activity over supporting the humanitarian needs of its own people. With regards to the sanctions, the administration hasn't lifted any sanctions, and as far as I know, it's implemented another 700 sanctions.
But it refuses to enforce it. My time's expired, but the results are indisputable. And Iran has gone from selling 300,000 barrels a day of oil to selling 2 million barrels of oil a day. That is funding this war of terror against us.
I'm almost encouraged, I want to encourage you to go on. I feel like playing some John Philip Sousa music right now. I am such a big fan of our diplomatic corps and these interagency teams that I encounter when I travel, and I just thank all of you again for your service and your families as well. I know you make some sacrifices, and I appreciate it. Ambassador Jacobson, our relationship with Iraq has grown stronger in recent years thanks to increased cooperation with the government. However, there's much work that still needs to be done. Iraq still relies heavily on Iranian energy. Iranian-backed militia groups are still given virtually free rein to attack U.S. service members and diplomats, and they continue to have a long way to go in terms of strong governance. When we met, you described that countering Iranian influence will require a whole-of-government approach within the Iraqi government. If confirmed, how will you lead a similar whole-of-mission approach to this challenge?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and you are correct in that it requires a whole-of-government approach because it's an extremely complex issue. With regards to stemming the Iranian pernicious influence in Iraq, we need to bring all of the tools to bear. With regards to the energy independence, critical. When Prime Minister Soudani was here in April, he committed to having achieved energy independence from Iran by 2030, which is an ambitious goal. They do have a plan, I understand. Our colleague, Assistant Secretary Jeff Pyatt, was recently in Iraq, including both Baghdad and Erbil, to work on further developing that plan. And there has been progress made on that plan. I could go into details on some deals, but I'll just note that this is also an opportunity for the U.S. private sector, particularly to bring their innovation in reducing gas flaring, developing fields. It's really important. I'd also notice on the economic front the important work being done by Treasury to modernize the banking sector in Iraq and getting it connected to the international banking system to reduce the influence that Iran can have on Iraq through the banking. With regards to the security situation...
Could I just interject real quickly?
Yes.
With respect to the oil and gas, our private sector partners, are they already quite active in assisting with that flaring mitigation effort that you referenced?
They're already doing it, and we also hope, there was this $27 billion deal with Total, a French firm, last year to develop Iraq's capacity, and we're hoping to see some significant American content in that eventual project as well, which we did support.
Okay. Ambassador Jacobson, in light of your extensive experience, I'm going to ask you sort of a different question here. We were reminded this week that ISIS remains a threat, not just in Iraq and Syria, but also here, as we saw the arrest of 8 ISIS-affiliated Tajiks in America. Given your background in Tajikistan with Afghanistan and across the region, what perspective will you bring to the coalition to defeat ISIS, or perhaps in how you sell this effort to the Iraqis?
The defeat of terrorism in general also requires a whole-of-government, multi-pronged approach. I did follow the Tajikistan story, having served there. I think when we think about Iraq in particular, we have to think about what attracts people to these terrorist organizations in the first place, the need for economic development, the need for a government that has sufficient ability to provide services to its people so that it reduces the draw of terrorism and also reduces the influence, for example, of the Iran-aligned militia groups, which are active in politics and economics, as well as taking shots at us. I should have said I got distracted on the gas and oil, but absolutely, if confirmed, I will continue the policy of using all the tools against those militia groups, including the financial ones and the military ones when appropriate. I think getting to an eventual closure of the Al-Hol camp in Syria is important in this regard. It can be a recruiting ground for terrorism. There are still 19,000 Iraqis at that camp, and we will need, if I'm confirmed, I will work on this as well, both to provide better situation for those in the camp, but also to bring them at a more rapid pace into Iraq for rehabilitation and reintegration.
Ms. Gavito, Libya's political instability continues to be an albatross around the necks of European partners, but a boon to human smugglers and illicit financiers. It's a country with an enormous energy potential, as you've indicated, that's being siphoned off by elites that are likely not keen to see an East-West reunification. You mentioned innovation as a point of emphasis in your opening remarks. The energy is supporting wars by our adversaries. How might you apply innovation or other efforts to seek to change that?
Thank you, Senator. Libyans have been very open with U.S. interlocutors that they desire greater presence by U.S. companies. So I do think that there is great opportunity, whether it is in the areas of energy or security or infrastructure, for U.S. companies, business with the strong corporate governance cultures that they bring with them to make a positive impact on the Libyan economy. We've also seen greater presence by U.S. companies as the security situation in Libya has stabilized. $291 million in U.S. exports to Libya last year, with much more opportunity on the horizon. And so if confirmed, whether as a counter to the efforts by Russia to enmesh Libya in greater regional conflict, or by the PRC, which currently dominates the 4G network with companies like Huawei and ZTE, we do have American businesses that can play a positive role.
Thank you. Chairman?
Senator Ricketts, second round.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Jacobson, obviously the United States has invested a lot of blood and treasure in Iraq. 3,400 Americans died during the Iraq War. Since 2003, we've invested $2 trillion. We've prevented the collapse of the Iraqi government from ISIS. And obviously, we've got continuing challenges there now. We've got Iran-backed militias that are continuing to attack U.S. troops and diplomatic facilities close to 200 times across the region since October 7th. And obviously, we had the drone strike on Tower 22 in Jordan that killed 3 Americans there. It seems like these attacks have subsided since the peak earlier this winter, but of course, that threat could always pick back up again. Obviously, we expect, the American people expect that Iraq is going to protect our U.S. troops, advisors, convoys, diplomatic facilities. If confirmed, what actions, specific actions, can you take to ensure that the government of Iraq understands its obligation to keep our people safe? I mean, you mentioned, for example, closing the camp in Syria. Can you give me some other specific things that, if you're confirmed ambassador, you can do to help keep our folks safe?
Thank you for that question. In my previous assignments as ambassador and in this one as well, if confirmed, there is nothing more important to me than the protection of American lives. With regards to the Iran-aligned militia groups, which you correctly note have attacked our U.S. interests more than 170 times between the middle of October and the beginning of February, and another sort of short round at the end of April. We need to bring all the tools that we have to bear on that. I will say that Prime Minister Soudani has repeatedly condemned these attacks, has recognized publicly the commitment of the government of Iraq to protect U.S. interests, including the mission from these attacks. But the U.S. government also has to be prepared to respond itself, and I think it is, including by increasing sanctions, by diplomatic efforts to have other partners engage in sanctions, and to take military strikes when necessary, including to degrade infrastructure and on some occasions to actually take out the individuals who've been plotting those attacks against our interests. If confirmed by the Senate, I would certainly engage in all the tools, the diplomatic with the government of Iraq, but also with surrounding countries, allies, and partners, the financial, including sanctions, ensuring that those sanctions are actually implemented and effective, and supporting the military options when required.
Yeah. And then how can we make sure that Iraq is taking steps against the Iranian-backed militia groups that are attacking Israel right now, because that's a threat as well from Iraq?
That's absolutely correct, Senator, and we most recently saw this on the 13th of April. Not only did we see an amazing U.S. military response to those attacks, but we also saw efforts from the State Department, the administration, and others to engage the international community to also join in additional financial pressure following that attack. And I would continue to do that kind of work if I were confirmed.
Great, thanks. I want to switch gears on you just a little bit and talk more about energy again. How Iraq, that is rich in energy resources, has to be dependent on Iran is just puzzling. And I know that's one of the key parts of our policy is to get them off of Iranian energy, because that's just giving money to Iran to continue to fuel the attacks on us and Israel and terrorism around the world. And I note that in March, Iraq actually extended its gas import deal with Iran for another 5 years. But in your testimony, you mentioned that you promote Iran's energy independence, or Iraq's energy independence, so that Iran can't use this as a thing. Talk to me a little bit about how this is playing with China, because Chinese firms recently won a lion's share of the licenses for oil and gas exploration in Iran. It seems like that's kind of a double-edged sword there as well. Can you just talk to me about how you think about the specific actions you can take to help get Iraq off of Iran energy, and then touch upon the Chinese firms that are winning these, and what are the pros and cons of that? What kind of threats does that provide?
Thank you for that question. There's a lot to say here, so I'll try to limit myself. But many of the steps that have been taken by the U.S. government in the past are helping Iraq to achieve greater energy independence all the time. In the recent years, they've moved from 35% to 25% of their energy imported from Iran. They have increasing energy needs because their economy and their population is growing. So we all need to get ahead of that curve. Some of the specific examples are increased connectivity with neighbors other than Iran, including the fact that by the end of the year, Iraq will be the first non-GCC country connected to the GCC grid. Its connection with Jordan went live earlier this year. Its connection with Saudi. The U.S. government is also funding a project on reforms to the electricity grid to make it more efficient, to reduce the losses. You may know that the electricity grid is pretty much a GE project. And of course, the investment and development that American firms are doing, and we hope they'll be able to do even more of. I've always been a big proponent of promoting American business when I've been posted overseas, including in Turkmenistan, in the gas and oil sector, and U.S. exports, for example, everywhere I've served. With regards to China, I've also had a chance to see how China works in my previous assignments in Tajikistan, in Ethiopia in particular. You can see that Chinese companies come in and they do a project, they assign a value to that project that the country then has to pay back over time. It's really not transparent. They use mostly their own labor. They're not doing technology or knowledge transfer to the local government. And a few years later, you can see that this infrastructure has starting to crumble. And if I were confirmed, I would certainly, recognizing the investments that China is making in gas and oil, but also telecoms, work with the government to help them understand the value proposition offered by American private sector ingenuity versus the debt trap diplomacy offered by the PRC.
Yeah. Ambassador, I think, again, you've got great experience there to be able to share with the people of Iraq, based upon your previous experience, about how the Chinese come in and do business, that hopefully they'll be able to benefit from your wisdom there to the benefit of their country when they're dealing with China. So thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.